The signing for hours. We can talk.
Oh, we can talk all day. Amazing.
That's right.
Well, I wanted to bring up another book, a different book from Hellboy this time around.
Thank God. Anything but Hellboy.
Anything but? Oh.
That's right. No.
No, we know you, kid.
At least you're not hauling out Marvel and DC stuff.
I would not.
Let's not do an hour on Rocket Raccoon, shall we?
Fair enough. But I've overheard you speaking with quite a few people who have brought this book in, The Amazing Screw-On Head, to have it signed, of course. And you have mentioned quite a few times to quite a few people that this is one of your absolute favorite books that you have ever made.
Not one of. It is my favorite book.
And
it's the book, like when I travel, it's the book I take with me. In case anybody ever said, what do you do? That's the book that represents me best.
And what is it about the book that you feel represents you the best?
It's basically all the stories in there were done just to entertain myself. Nothing in there was ever meant to be commercial or saleable. It was stuff I only thought I would ever think was funny. After Hellboy became relatively successful, I felt the need to do something that was not really just for me, but to put something out there to let the audience know that I knew I could just keep doing Hellboy. I could just keep cranking out the same thing that was proving to be a kind of commercial thing. But I needed to do something that would go out there and people would go, what the hell's he thinking? That's not Hellboy. That's nothing like Hellboy. He couldn't possibly think anybody would want that thing. I did it for almost no money because I didn't want the publisher to lose much money on it because I knew they would hold it over my head forever, that we did your little, your vanity project that, lost a lot of money. So I said, give me the worst deal you've got where I own it and you publish it, and they did. And what so often happens, at least in my case, is this thing that I did just for myself became, well, I don't want to say it became popular, but right away people started saying, oh, that's the best thing you've ever done. So that was the story of The Amazing Screw-On Head. But there's also other short stories in here that feel like they're the same kind of idea. There's a story I did with my daughter called The Magician and the Snake, which I think is probably the best thing I will ever do. And probably some of that is I'm a parent and I got to work with my daughter, but really, she came up with this amazingly bizarre little story. She told me the story, and I said, I just agreed to do a story for an anthology book. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but this thing you've come up with is so much weirder than anything I could think of. Let's do that. It was easy. The storytelling worked. It was in a way, it was very personal. So that was nice. And then, years later, after The Amazing Screw-On Head, it had been optioned for a TV series, and they made a pilot episode of, the show. That was released on DVD, and so many people were coming up to me saying, oh, I really like The Amazing Screw-On Head. And I realized that they were talking about the cartoon, they weren't talking about the comic. So I had done The Amazing Screw-On Head, I'd done The Magician and the Snake, but it wasn't enough material to make a book. So years after doing those stories, I finally went back and tried to get in that same headspace where I didn't care what the audience wanted, I just wanted to entertain myself. And I did, I guess, like 3 more stories. And they worked. I like them all, which is amazing for me to do a book that's 100 pages and I like everything in it. So yeah, that's my book. That's if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, at least I did that book. Nothing against Hellboy. Hellboy pays the bills, but that's the book I'm very happy to have out there.
So are we, and there's something. It's the time period as well that fascinates you. It's not just doing the weird stories, there was something about the 1800s that draws you in?
Well, and again, this is something that really threw the cartoon guys. These stories have no time period. These stories are entirely just made out of shit I like to draw. So I like people in old-fashioned clothing. I like old buildings. I like old machines. But it's just a nonsense book. It's like a dollhouse of odd little objects. To me, this thing is a puppet show. It's just strange little characters I would like to have physical objects of to move around. So, because Abraham Lincoln was the president in the Screw-on Head story, you know, the cartoon guys were like, well, it has to take place in this period, so we'll tie it into the Civil War. And I was like, no. I just used Abraham Lincoln because if you're going to draw an American president, the most fun and recognizable guy to draw, I guess now would be Trump. Not that he'd be fun to draw, and not that I would do it, but Lincoln was just like a great face to draw. But they couldn't, yeah, I guess so much of it is, the visuals are so much, you know, 18 whatever, through 1902, you know, it's that era, and you know, they couldn't just do it as a nonsense story. They had to make it, they had to ground it in that time period, which one of many reasons I've never been able to watch the show.
All right. So when you say you're fascinated by machines and everything else, and we've seen that in Hellboy as well, are you out looking for different machines or steam engines, or is that something you actively seek out for reference? Or
no, I mean I've got, you know, a big file of shit that just looks like it would be fun to draw. I don't like modern technology very much. I don't like smooth lines. I like clunky gears and you know, things that have steam coming out of them. You know, I like that kind of. I'm a very low tech guy. I like things with rivets and stuff like that.
As well as your references here, and you say you have a big library of references. When we were talking a few days ago, you mentioned that you think you plot out the stories very visually. Would you mind taking us through the process of creating a visual story such as this?
My process for coming up with a story is so, it's different every time. Pick one. Yeah, I mean, I come up with pictures that I like. Especially when, you know, in the old days when I was drawing everything myself, I just came up with things I like to draw and then found an excuse to draw them. The Amazing Screw-on Head is almost entirely made out of photos I just had laying around that said, ooh, I really want to draw that boat once. I don't want to do a story about the boat, but I'd like to draw it once. So it was an excuse to just draw stuff I wanted to draw. I've gotten pretty good at patching those things together. When I write for somebody else, I'm much more plot-oriented. But I guess I'm kind of lazy. So when I'm drawing my own stuff, I just want to draw what I want to draw, which is why when I killed Hellboy off, I sent him to hell, which was basically sending him to the inside of that book. It's that my personal little toy puppet world. But as far as making up a story, I generally have enough, I've read enough, and I think enough about the kind of stuff I read and the stuff I like that I usually can patch together a basic idea of a story. Or I read, like, I read a particular folktale or something, and I go, oh, that's a Hellboy story. That's the easiest. If I read something, I did a Christmas story years ago, and it was a fairy tale or a folktale I read, and it just stuck in my head long enough till I said, oh, if I insert Hellboy into this story, boom, it works. There's a Japanese story I did with Hellboy. It's the closest I've come to a straight up Japanese adaptation of a folktale. It was just one of those stories where you go, oh, there's a main character, just replace whoever the main character is in the story with Hellboy. Those are the easiest. I did one, probably my favorite thing I've ever written. a story called The Crooked Man. Takes place in the Appalachian Mountains. I always wanted to do a very American, backwoodsy kind of folktale story. So I knew the environment I wanted to do. I knew the feel I wanted it to have, but I didn't have a specific story. But I'm a big collector of books, and specifically books on folklore. So I had 3 books on Appalachian folklore. So I didn't know what I was looking for. I was hoping I would find something, and as I read through the first book, it's like there's like a little man that sits in the back. So I'm reading, and I would find bits like, how to become a witch by boiling a cat and saving a bone. You go, hey, I'll use that. I'll chuck that into the little man in the back. You find another bit, and you go, that's pretty cool, and they go into the back, which is a weird. Follow me if you can on this. There's always a couple other people back there. And just as I went through this book, by about halfway through the book, and it was all different little folk tales. Halfway through the book, the man in the back said, that's enough, we got it. And the man in the back had pieced together all the different pieces. While I was just reading, there's a separate part of my brain kind of going, this piece fits next to this piece, and that piece fits next to that piece, until it had enough pieces that it said, we're done. So that's what I kind of hope. I mean, that one was weird because it was so much made of scraps. But there's always a part of me that's looking for how to fit pieces together. There's stories that I've plotted or tried to plot that didn't quite work. And they never quite go away. There's always a bit of something I like or something I wanted to draw that I didn't have a place for. And so there's sort of this Sargasso Sea in the back of my head someplace of half-finished story ideas. This graveyard of ships, but they're pieces of story. And every once in a while, you kind of go and say, well, maybe this one fits into that one. Nope, that still doesn't fit. You're looking for pieces to add to these things to make them work. I find also I can switch that part of my brain, not completely off, but when I stopped writing Hellboy stories, I stopped looking. For 25 years when I was doing Hellboy, I was constantly looking for stories. And I stacked them up. I stacked up ones that were almost done, I stacked up ones that were done, and I kind of filed them away. And what was nice is I had them at different lengths. It was like, the worst one was, I came up with a gigantic 3-book story arc. With Russia and the Wild Hunt, and it was just this massive thing. And I looked at it and said, well, that's a cool story. I'll never draw it because it's too big. So that was, but it was filed away. And but I had a variety of 6-page stories, 8-page stories, one-issue stories. So when something would come up, like Dark Horse would say, oh, we're going to do a collection of, the Dark Horse Book of Witchcraft, I'd go, okay, let me look through the inside of my head and see if I've got an 8-page witchcraft story. Just recently, out of the blue, a great artist, Adam Hughes, I don't know if anybody's heard of him, Adam Hughes came to me and he wanted to do a Hellboy story. And I went, oh crap, the part of my brain that makes up new stories has been switched off for a long time. But I dug around inside there, and I had plotted a chapter of Hellboy in Hell that was a Christmas story in hell. So I was able to dig that one out, dust it off, set it, change the setting. And there might be a couple more finished ones back there I've forgotten about, but I'm going through a phase right now where I'm looking just to do pictures and not stories. So the part of my brain that's looking to make stories or find stories is on its lowest setting. But there's still a problem, like just trying to read for enjoyment. Or watch a movie. there's always a part of my brain that's going, I can use that, or wouldn't it be better if they did this? And you're just kind of going, shut up, I just want to watch the movie. Shut up, I just want to read the story. Not everything needs to be, put back in here so I do my own version of it.
So, now you said you wanted to do more like single images, paintings. We know that you went away for a while and just wanted to focus on your painting. How does that process for you? How is that different from when you are plotting the story? What do you look for in the painting?
Well, when I'm just making pictures for fun, which is something I've done like 5 times in the last 25 years, you don't need a bunch of images, you just need one. The hardest thing about this drawing for fun, painting, single image stuff is doing stuff that doesn't turn into a story. It's really difficult for me to draw a guy sitting on a weird shaped tractor and not start going, why is he there? And what does that tractor do? And who's in that house in the background? But I'm kind of forcing myself to say, don't think about that. Don't explain it. Just let it be a picture. But it was very interesting with The Amazing Screw-On Head and then the stuff I did for Hellboy and Hell. I fell in love with the environment so much. What I found by the end of Hellboy and Hell is not that I'd completely lost interest in Hellboy, but I was more interested in the world he was walking around in. So I'm sure there's other stories set in that world, and they're probably, these stories. But what I really wanted to do is say, gee, I really had a good time drawing those buildings and the chimneys and all that stuff. Can't that be enough? Or if I was going to do something, a sequence, is it possible to do a sequence, not really a story, but just say, let's just do a series of images of that street or that rooftop. Let's zoom in on that rooftop or zoom in through that window and through a room and there's a dusty old woman sitting there doing some goddamn thing. I think that would be an interesting thing to explore, and nobody would buy it, which seems to be part of my goal. So that would be fine. But yeah, it's just composing images and keeping the storytelling out of it. But yes, with Hellboy and Hell and with this, I did find the subject matter I want to draw.
Okay, so also you mentioned that you had this 3-piece arc before, and then you started doing the collaborations. And are you, because I know you're not leaving the world of Hellboy behind completely.
I can't. I wish I could, but he's following me. Goddamn thing. It's paying for the house, so I can't complain, but still.
So what does the future hold for you in terms of your work? And of course, everybody knows the film is coming, but what would you like to start doing in not the immediate future, but in the not too distant future?
I don't know. What's exciting to me is, what can I say and what can't I say? What's exciting to me is I'm wrapping up some stuff right now, some Hellboy-related stuff, some writing and some things I'm drawing, some covers, other stuff like that. But it looks like by the end of the year or a couple months into next year, I will be done. And I have absolutely no solid work lined up. And that, to me, fortunately because the Hellboy machine is paying the bills, that's not scary at all. I'm really looking forward to waking up in the morning and going, I don't know what I'm going to do today. That could change quickly. I announced I was taking a year off to do paintings, and that lasted 3 months. But since I've gone back to doing comics, and the paintings I did, the handful of paintings I did, I kind of felt like, I'm starting to, well, I don't know if I can say I was enjoying it, but I started doing some things I was pretty happy with. So I'm kind of, I've got the itch to keep going. So I'd like to do some paintings. This weird little again, I don't know if I'm ever going to do a 5-page story just about a doorway and panning in and out of doorways and old windows, but I'd like to try something like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate because I've been, the Hellboy thing has proven to be very, relatively successful. So I have the luxury most commercial artists never get to create a body of work that's theirs and not worry about, any kind of a client or, even selling the work. So I just like to do that and see. There's something really wonderful about creating a body of work that's yours, that nobody else could do. That's what this book is. Not that Hellboy, isn't me, but nobody in their right mind would ever come up with that book. It's entirely made of all the shit I like, good, bad, or otherwise. So I've created something, I've gotten that opportunity to create something that's purely mine. So I'd like to keep doing that.
That sounds really fair. Also, just to sort of start wrapping it up, you mentioned that you had a lot of short stories in your head, and you mentioned that you had a lot of longer works earlier, at least. Now most of it's published, maybe. Would you, for aspiring comics creators, would you recommend that short story anthology kind of work, or in terms of learning the craft, honing their skills and so on?
That's an excellent question. Did everybody hear that question? Yes, no, you heard the question? One thing, I get a lot is other artists coming to me and saying, I'd love to do what you do, but because of the marketplace, because DC Comics pays me so well, because of this, because of that, I want to do my own work, but, I can't for whatever reason. And my answer is, dude, you don't have to do a 900-page book. Do a 4-page story. Do a 6-page story. Do an 8-page story. If you really want to do something that's yours, do it, and do it short. It's not a gigantic time commitment. You don't even have to really publish it. You can put it on your website. I find so many guys are looking for an excuse not to do their own stuff. They love the idea of doing their own stuff, but it's always, well, of course, you did Hellboy in '94. That's when you could have done something like that. There are so many places to get your work published. Granted, they're probably not going to pay you what Marvel and DC are paying, but if you really want to do your stuff, do it, and try it out small. And, if you never try, you're never going to find out if it has an audience. But I see so many people these days, they post the stuff on their website. I don't know what's involved in that, but it's a very immediate way to put your work out and test and see if it has an audience. So that would be my suggestion. You don't start with Dune. You don't start with a 9,000-page space opera, though I have any number of people coming up to me going, oh yeah, I want to do my own comic. It's got 60,000 characters, and it's 32 trade paperbacks, and you go, dude, why don't you do a 6-page story and see see if anybody gives a shit. Do that first.
And that sounds like a wonderful note, I think, to wrap things up.
Cool. Thank you. And if anybody else has any other questions for me, just grab me. I'm going to mill around a bit, and I'm happy to answer any questions and stuff. Oh, there's one.
Why don't you color your own thing?
Why don't I color my own things? Oh, because I don't know how. No, that's a pretty good question. For years, I've been working with a colorist named Dave Stewart, who's fantastic, and technically, I have no idea. I would have to learn how to do that, color on the computer and stuff, and I have no idea how to do it. It's much easier for me to describe to somebody what I'm looking for and let them, somebody who knows how to do that on the computer, do it. I'm also very fortunate that Dave is very tolerant. So we've been working together for a really long time. He knows the kinds of colors I like. And when I say, I need this scene to be quiet, or I need this scene to be sad, or I need this scene to be loud and fiery, he knows how to do that. And is willing to put up with it when I look at it and go, well, could it be a little bit quieter and a little bit this, and that dot over there is supposed to be this color instead of that color. So, yeah. But, I mean, there is something about the painting. There's a kind of color work I do that I can't get from Dave. It's just not what he would do. So I'm very happy to do that kind of work, but I can't imagine, partly because I'm too lazy, ever imagine taking the time to learn how to color my stuff on the computer. So there you go. All right. Thank you. Like I said, I'll be roaming around.
I'm Charlie Adlard, and you're watching Art Bubble TV.